Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 698. I'm Tom Cagley, your host today. Susan Parente and I had an extraordinary conversation about team leads in Agile and leadership. In some cases, the role of a team lead is treated as if it were surplus to requirements. In other cases, it's a tool to delegate work to people in an effort to subvert self-organization. And when the organization gets it right, the role is a vehicle to unlocking the capabilities of teams. Are you ready to talk team leads in Agile? It's time for the conversation. Susan Parente, thank you for bringing your wonderful I'm Not a Scrumdamentalist column to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Well, I'm sitting here still not a Scrumdamentalist. So not much has changed since we last talked, but yet lots of things have changed.
The whole world changes very quickly, doesn't it?
Yep.
Susan, today, this is a change too, because, in my career, I've been a coder, a tester, a team lead, a manager of departments, a manager of departments, and now I got a real job and became a consultant. But this whole team lead thing in Agile, I'm confused. Let's have your opinion on what the heck does a team lead in an Agile team do?
Well, good question. So, as you know, I'm also a professor. I teach university classes in Agile, actually teaching 2 right now. And I do get the question a lot, like, what does fill in the blank do? Like specific roles. And it's funny because there's always kind of 2 answers. There's what are they supposed to do? Like, what does the textbook say? And what I've actually seen. Okay, especially with Scrum. With Scrum, we often find that the Scrum Master does things the Scrum Master is not supposed to do. I had one of my students say something about the Scrum Master being the person who's the liaison between the product owner and the team. And, you try not to react negatively, but yes, that's exactly what I did is, oh my God. So the visual, since everybody's on the audio, is that Tom put his palm to his forehead. And that's exactly what my thought was. And obviously in the classroom, it's open discussion. So you're sort of like, well, I'm not going to say I've never seen that, but I go to the Scrum Guide to tell me what the Scrum Master should do. And we want transparency. We don't want anyone to be a liaison between the product owner and the team. And so that brings to mind, what about the team lead? So one of the things I find people mistakenly do, so one of the things I teach for is the PMI ACP, Agile Certified Practitioner. And people mistakenly answer questions based only on Scrum because that's what they know most. And so, it's a common mistake. It's a pitfall that I remind people of. But people do it also just in discussion. And when Tom said, hey, let's talk about this, I said, okay, so you're talking about Agile in general, because in Scrum, we don't have a team lead. And that's something that to remind people of, because a lot of times people say, like, I don't even get, how does a team work without a team lead? Like it's just foreign to them because they're not used to it. I know Tom knows, I know this, many colleagues of mine know this because we kind of own our own business. Tom does consulting, so do I. I do it for a company, but I also have my own business. And when you have your own business and you get together with other people who have their own business, guess what? You form a team like that, a self-organized team very well because no one there is the team lead, right? So, and I know we're talking about team lead. So first I'm going to talk about what's not team lead, right? So when you have a bunch of equal people come together that are equally powerful self-leaders come together and work together, they actually do this. And I think people's experience why people don't take up that, like are not effective in that way is because they're not clear with accountability and integrity. That's my take. And I think when you own your own business, integrity and accountability are necessary to be successful. I don't know anybody who owns a business who doesn't have those things. there may actually be people who don't have integrity that own businesses. There aren't people I'm working with. So I'll put it that way. So, and they're not people I would want to be on a team with. But just that concept, I think, is what makes the team work to be self-organized. Okay. So that's really great. It's great when you can do that. But oftentimes, just in the structure of organizations, it doesn't seem to work for people. There needs to be some team lead that does something, right? So that brings us
single throat to choke. I think I've heard that a half a dozen times actually in the last month.
Well, I think what I hear a lot in government contracting is a belly button to push, which is a little bit odd. I'm not really sure where that comes from, and hope nobody's belly button is actually being touched, because that might be an HR problem. But so.
Yeah, you could get away with choking them easier than punching their belly button.
Exactly. And since we're remote, it's a little tough to do that too. But yes, it's basically someone to yell at when things don't go right. When things go wrong, you can yell at them. It's also somebody who can do reporting. So my answer to your question is going to be a little bit nebulous here, but I am going to answer it. So different things in different places. So what does a team lead mean? For me, a successful Agile team lead needs to instill the Agile mindset. And in order to do that, they're supporting the practices and principles of Agile, which means they're facilitating that team. So just because they're a team lead doesn't mean they're delegating to the team. That to me would be the Agile way, right? So if I have a team lead that's delegating and I say I'm doing Agile, I'm going to say you're not doing Agile. So that's my take. So that brings me back to, what does that team lead look like? Well, I think about what leadership style would be there, and it would be servant leader, perhaps grateful leader, which we've talked abundance about, and we can get into that a little bit more here. But yes, they're listening. So what I define as servant leader is somebody who says to the team and each of the members, what can I do to support you or to help you so that you can be successful, and in turn the team can be successful. And right now, actually, I'm supporting a cybersecurity team, and I'm not in a team lead role. I'm actually a transition manager, so I'm helping to transition new people onto the contract, supporting a federal client. And what I do is literally that, like, how can I help you be successful? Where you stopped, especially onboarding people for federal contracts is not as simple as you think. You kind of have to onboard them to the company that's doing the contract. And then you also have to onboard them to the client site, whatever that looks like. When you add remote, it gets a little bit more complicated. You've got to get like an ID. We use TAX or PIVs, which authenticate you. That's how you log in on your computer. We're well past passwords. We have been for a few decades past using passwords. So there's some challenges to that, logistical challenges to remote onboarding. And so I facilitate that. And I literally ask people, like, how's it going? Where are you at? What have you done? Okay, what's our next step, and what's in your way? And then I work on getting things out of their way. And it's very interesting how people respond to that, because they're like, oh, wow, someone's going to help me. And especially remote people feel like they're a little bit like a person on the island. So a team lead is going to do that. They're going to facilitate team members to be empowered or even like resourced to do the work that they need to do. I would also say a team lead is probably going to do some sort of reporting. They're going to be a belly button to push. They're going to be, who the customer goes to. They just need to be careful that they don't then turn that into, I'm the boss, I'm going to tell you what to do, because that's something different.
Yeah, it almost always seems to, or not almost, but it a lot of times does seem to turn around to, well, hey, Susan, I want you to do this today. And Tom, I want you to do this. And, we got these 4 defects. You work those. And, I'm going to go to a meeting. Arguably, what you just described, if we were doing Scrum, that would be the Scrum Master, wouldn't it?
Well, the Scrum Master doesn't delegate, but what I described, yes, I would call it a team facilitator, the team lead to be a team facilitator, because if you're doing a role of team lead and you're doing it inside of Agile, then you need to have the Agile mindset. And so I don't see how that person delegates. Now, it'd be interesting if we had somebody else on this discussion who would argue the other point that, like, well, if you're leading the team, then you're delegating. Yes, in a traditional environment, maybe even in a hybrid environment, we're using traditional and Agile. But I think if you're a team lead in an Agile environment, you need to have the Agile mindset. And so the Agile mindset to me is the team still needs to be self-organized. The team lead then becomes a representative of the team, maybe the person that does reporting, maybe a person who helps the team with different things to make sure the team has resources they need, things of that sort. But I still don't see them delegating, because I feel like the moment they delegate, you ruin Agile. Like the beauty of Agile, I mean, if you ask me, people who design Agile, they wanted to empower the team members to figure out how the work was going to get done and do the work. That's one of the things that's broken in traditional project management. It assumes that the project manager has got the answers. And I will tell you, even when I lead traditional projects, you still got to ask your team members who know the work, who know what they're doing, how it's going to get done. I mean, if you don't include them in the plan, in the schedule, then, I mean, good luck with that, you know. And I have had times where you had to develop a schedule without those people, but then you go find somebody on another team that's done that work and you use them to help create the schedule. A PM locking themselves up in a room with a laptop creating a schedule usually does not result in a schedule that's adhered to.
No, it's the thing that you put in the RFP or something else to sell the darn thing. In almost every organization that I have seen in the past 5 years, there has been this role, team lead. And, some of them actually have management-y kinds of powers where they might get involved in making sure that people get training, make sure that people end up with goals and objectives and that kind of stuff. But in a lot of them, it's, hey, you're there, you've been promoted from the team, you need to use your influence, and that's where it falls into this delegation or assignment kind of stuff. Use your influence to get stuff done. I call that a straw boss, basically. You're bossing the straw around, not necessarily anything else. So where I see it work the best is where that team lead is an enabler, like you've described, but also at the same time has a lot of technical acumen that they are helping the team with. So they're helping them with the solution. They're helping them stick to the architecture, those sorts of things. I almost think that where they're doing Agile, they have the Agile mindset, where it works best is where they are more technical in nature.
That's very interesting. So the one of the projects, I said project, I'm like, there's a few of them. One of the projects that I'm working on right now, there is a technical person who is not only one of the most technical people on the contract, on the team, but they're also very well connected with the client. So they came on board from a previous contract. And right away, we knew, like, in the interview process, they're like, hey, this person's great. They've got the technical acumen. They're well connected. They're good at communicating. And so we decided he would be a good site lead. So our contract has multiple customer sites. Now we're somewhat remote, but there's some work that needs to be done on site. For example, if it's clearance work, you need to do it on site. So he's on site on occasion, but the site lead concept is that he's a person people go to because he knows resources that people could go to if they have a problem. He knows kind of how to solve things or deal with things in ways that I, for example, wouldn't know because I'm new to the client. Also, I'm not nearly as technical as he is, but that to me would be a team lead. And what we don't want him to do is anything sort of managerial. So, you have your system with the performance evaluation information and even signing timesheets, like all these boring things that we do as managers. Like, we don't want him to do that, because he's actually also supporting some systems that he's working on. And so in order for him to be a team lead and do the work that he needs to do still, we're not giving him any of the managerial stuff. Instead, that's being dealt with by the PM or myself as the transition manager, basically other managers. And that to me is a true team lead. When you have a team lead that's also doing, performance evaluations and things of that sort, I'm not going to say I haven't done that other places, but that is then that's more of a delegation model. It's not the same thing that we're talking about here. And so maybe that's helpful to our listeners to think about that delineation of, are you doing a managerial, like HR kind of task? If so, that would not be the team lead. I don't see that in that role. And I think that the team lead, like you said, tends to come from the team as like a strong person, a good communicator, a technical person who can assist other people who maybe are more junior, more new to the organization. So there's something that they know, or the things that they do, skills that they have, that bringing to the team makes the team more powerful. And what I find is a good team lead is often somebody that other people look to even before you assign them that duty, like even without that duty. They're sort of like a natural leader, not necessarily a natural born leader, but they're a natural leader on the team. And so if people are already coming to them, okay, make them the team lead. So then it's a clearly defined thing.
Right. And so that role, I think, does evolve out of the team well, when it's done well, or sometimes it really is a reflection of the Peter principle, right? Somebody's been around so long, we have to promote them. We promote them into this role and they stink at it, which is, in essence, probably what would happen if you took that site manager and made him more, and I'm doing air quotes around, more the voice of management, doing all that management stuff. They might do it very well, but I think they'd hate it.
I have a great example of that too. Okay. So I never name names, of course, but so there is a project that I know of where somebody who's very, very strong on the team came up to a management role to lead the team. Now that role actually was project manager, and there's been some struggle because they're still trying to do the technical things they did in their role, which actually you've now helped just clarify for me right now what the difference between the team lead and the manager is. Because in her role, she should not be doing technical system support. She should only be doing management. And she's struggling because she's spending, the day doing the management stuff, and then she's working at night getting the technical stuff done. And she's just like literally burnt out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's taken myself and other leaders in the organization to be like, you can't do this. Like, you need to let those things go. And it's one of the hardest things. I was talking to another colleague of mine, and one of the hardest things for somebody who's technical to do is to literally step away from doing that into a management role. That is not the same as a team lead. And I think that distinction is incredibly valuable. I'm now realizing that might help me to help her, taking that distinction and saying, you're not a team lead, you're the manager, you're delegating, you're telling people how to do the work, you're creating the structure and the process for how work gets done. That is not agile, but it is a very different role. And it is hard often for technical people to step away. And the reason is because they might not do it the way that I would do it. Right. That's the big problem. Like,
of course,
you get elevated to that role because you're like, oh, you're so great at doing yada, yada, the development role. So let's make you a manager. Like, that is the stupidest thing that any company ever does. That person needs training on management. They need training on leadership. That's something I also just confronted recently. And I'm actually thinking, let's take management and leadership. Let's do a separate discussion on that, because that one's also very interesting. It kind of, I'm thinking about it now that we're talking about this, and what's the difference between those things. It's something we need to constantly think about. People in leadership roles, what's the difference between leadership and management? And my thought is, in Agile, we lead, we don't manage. I'm not saying there isn't place for managers, and obviously somebody's got to do performance evaluation, somebody's got to sign timesheets. I'm just saying that fundamentally that is not an Agile, which means you could have somebody doing those things that isn't necessarily your manager, right? That's just like, that is their job to do that. And so how you actually implement that inside of a company, there's lots of different ways. I'm not going to say one way is right, but if you have a true team lead, they're not doing those things. Because honestly, when you start signing somebody's timesheet, there's a certain power you have over that. If they don't sign it, you don't get paid. That's pretty powerful.
Well, and then it gets even more complicated in many organizations, where the people doing the work are contractors. They might be here on HB1 visas, and any blibbit. So you have a power differential to start with, right? I'm not going to cause any trouble. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, because if you get mad at me, I got to go back to wherever I'm coming from, right?
Yep.
And so with this power differential, it becomes even worse when you can grade them, which again, arguably, there are better ways to do that within different management structures. And again, we're at a transition point where I think a lot of things happen. Let's wrap on the team lead role with one more thought. Why don't you think the team lead is mentioned in the Scrum Guide? It's not mentioned in Extreme Programming. It's not mentioned in SAFe. It's not mentioned in LESS. It's not mentioned. Is it mentioned? It might be in DA, because DA is, a little bit more hybrid, waterfall-y, agile-y thing. Why isn't it in any of these things? Because it exists in real life.
Yeah. So first of all, there's like utopian Agile, and then there's the Agile that we actually operate in. I think that's part of it. Like I've said, I have worked in teams where people are literally equal, but what that tends to look like is we're working on a project and profit is split 33% to each of us, and there's 3 of us, or actually probably better, because there's 1% left. Probably there's 4 of us, and we each get 25%, right? So if you're truly doing that, you can truly say that you're on an equal footing team. I think it's somewhat rare. I think that it's more common that people on the team have different levels of knowledge and experience. And so I think that socially things don't tend to work that way. I mean, I think back to, what was that TV show, Survivor? And people are put into groups, and you see that just certain people take on a leadership role and other people follow. And that just happens in teams. And so I think you're right in that it seems to kind of be a natural phenomenon of human beings. And so it is odd that Scrum and other methods of Agile don't talk about it. And I do think, like I said, it's a little bit utopian. I'm not going to say I've never seen it. I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I think it is quite powerful, but I also think that inside of that, people are people, and things do happen where people might, if you're standing in a room, it's just a social psychology thing. There's 5 people talking to each other, and who's looking at who when whomever is talking. I mean, you could actually, social scientists could tell you who is actually, like, technically the leader. What direction are people looking in? Even if somebody's talking who isn't the quote unquote leader, somebody might be looking at somebody else for what is their facial expression, what's their reaction to that person. That will tell you something about. So there's a lot of language that we have going on, not coming out of our mouths, body language that that shows that. And, I think to myself, we have two dogs, and they're sort of like the alpha dogs. We have two alphas, a boy and a girl. And so it kind of works out okay. I mean, two alpha boys does not, two alpha girls does not, but if you're a boy and a girl alpha, it works. But it's funny sometimes. They do a little brawling. But anyway, that dynamic is just there. And so it is kind of interesting, because even if everybody agrees that everybody's equal footing, the question is that actually so? And I would say that I'm going to take a stab and say, if you've got 5 to 9 people, that somebody in there is going to be perceived to be a lead, even if they're not delegating or doing anything else like that. And then what I would suggest to that person, to support the innovative nature of Agile, to take that power that's been given to you by the group and use that to support the group with its success. And that would be a coach, be a servant leader. I mean, we talk about servant leader in Agile. I think everybody thinks that's just a Scrum Master. No, it's everybody on the team is a servant leader. So I believe you can have a team of 5 to 9 people where everyone's a leader. They just do it in a different way.
And at different times, perhaps.
Yep.
Susan, how would people continue the conversation?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Parente. I show up as being in the Washington, D.C. area, although I'm kind of there and in the New York area, so it's all good. Or you can shoot me an email, Parente at S as in Sam, the number 3 -tec.com. And would love to keep up a conversation with you. I also have a LinkedIn group that talks about Agile risk management. You can find me there. And if you're watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, go ahead and listen to some other ones that I have with Tom. There's always great conversations. I enjoy them, and I hope you do too.
In Reread Saturday News, Week 3 of our reread of Why Limit WIP, We Are Drowning in Work by Jim Benson, talks about the thrill of getting things done. People with a lot of WIP look for more work, things they can grab and complete to feel good about themselves. I'm as guilty as anyone else. Sometimes when items on my shortlist get stuck, instead of breaking the items down into smaller chunks to progress the work, I grab a less valuable task and just do it so I can check something off. Susan Parente, who you just listened to in one of her great Not A Scrumdamentalist podcast columns, described the same scenario. Link in the show notes. Get a copy of the book. Read along. In upcoming events, we are very close to the April 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, when I'll be doing a webinar titled When Prioritization Goes Bad. Link in the show notes. This webinar will help you recognize the scenarios where prioritization goes bad and avoid them. A special call to action. If you are a team lead, I need your help. I believe the team lead role is the least understood and the least talked about in Agile. It is really time to change that. I'm working on testing a model of team lead behaviors in Agile. I need some examples of real team lead job descriptions to map into the model. The glittering generalities that you find on the web don't match what really happens in the real world. I do not need things like salary or product details. No, that would be crazy talk. I will happily share the first cut of the model with anyone who helps and sponsor a virtual meeting to discuss the model with all participants. Please reach out at tcagley@tomcagley.com. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we will feature our interview with Matthew Stibbe. Matt and I discussed how leadership, or the lack thereof, contributes to projects in a wide range of environment. Whether that's software or marketing doesn't matter. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?